The 2001 PlayStation 2 classic Devil May Cry introduces players to the part-time demon hunter Dante. Half demon and half human, Dante possesses remarkable resistance to physical harm, as well as a high level of skill with both conventional and traditional weaponry. Such a mixture of items and special abilities sets the stage for Dante's adventure, where he will come to take his place among mythical heroes, both traditional and modern. As the player guides Dante through the events of Devil May Cry, they face the monomyth down in various forms, ultimately rising above convention to become masters of the reality of the game alongside Dante. Devil May Cry begins its mashup of mythology by establishing its own. Dante's father, Sparta, is the culture hero of the world of the game, and of such great significance that he's introduced before his son.
2 millenniums ago, there was a war between the human world and the other, the underworld. But somebody from the underworld woke up to justice and stood up against this legion alone. His name was Sparta. Later, he quietly reigned the human world and continued to preserve harmony until his death. He became a legend, the legendary Dark Knight, Sparta.
Sparta's introduction sets a tone for the rest of the game that is almost immediately subverted. Where one would expect to see the son of the legendary Dark Knight following in his father's footsteps in a sword and sorcery setting, Dante is instead introduced in his office. Half-eaten pizza and a bevy of liquor bottles accompany a collection of swords and demon bodies strewn across the walls. The general messiness of the office is punctuated by such bizarre objects as a drum set and questionable sword placements such as through Dante's pool table. These objects serve as an introduction to Devil May Cry's consistent focus on blending classical and modern aesthetics and influences. As Devil May Cry 3 director Hideaki Itsuno would later state, influences from the classical piece of literature, the Divine Comedy, have always been present in the series. The shared name of the story's main characters, Dante, is an obvious connection. Just as Dante from the Divine Comedy finds himself traversing the various levels of hell, Devil May Cry's Dante must navigate a hellish castle, and eventually the underworld itself. Dante's design is the epitome of a walking contradiction, the juxtaposition of a character name from classical literature among a collection of modern-day objects, such as a pool table and his guns, ebony and ivory, create dissonance between influence and the reality of the game. A further clash with other objects, such as Dante's rotary phone, a mysterious runes on the floor, and a generally rustic-looking office leave the player unsure of what or where exactly this character exists in time, demonstrating Devil May Cry's focus on introducing ambiguity through its radical blend of influences. Dante's theatrical flowing coat and heavy use of the color red take from patterns started generations ago. Other aspects of his personality and demeanor are from much more recent influences. The character Cobra from the manga series of the same name would serve as a cornerstone for Dante's joking yet serious personality, and his amulet that proves key to unlocking his father's true power is itself influenced from the seinen manga Berserk. Dante's red amulet is meant to evoke Griffiths, a character from the series who similarly keeps a red amulet in his possession. Dante also shares some of Griffith's defining traits, namely his long, white hair and extreme willpower. Both amulets symbolize their owner's humanity, but the actual use of them is where the characters differ. Griffith's amulet is ultimately used as a symbol of his rejection of his own humanity, whereas Dante's is used as a symbol of his ownership of his humanity. Dante's amulet, unlike Griffith's, was a gift from his late mother, Eva. Killed by demons when Dante was 7, it also serves as one of Dante's few ties to his mom. Between taking a name from classical literature and ideas from modern-day manga, Dante's design is meant to recall heroes of all eras. This mishmash of ideas extends far beyond Dante, and is similarly seen in the game's main setting, Malay Island. Dante has been told by Trish, his new companion, that the island's castle houses the Prince of Darkness, Mundus, the same demon Dante's father rebelled against to save the human world. As a game with a large number of influences that use the pattern of the monomyth, Devil May Cry also conforms to it. Transition from Dante's office to the mysterious Malay Island signifies the first major part of the hero's journey, the answering of the call, and the transition to a new, foreign space. Malay Castle itself is a bizarre combination of ancient and modern, and gives the player more insight into Dante as a character. A biplane, which will become essential later in the game, can be spotted in an early level. Dante must do battle with marionettes at the same time as he must battle a griffin, and Nightmare, a monster that resembles a demonic tank. Areas in the castle range from an underground pirate ship to an outdoor coliseum. Inquisitive players will also find during these opening levels that Dante is far more perceptive than he lets on. Rather than simply comment on what objects were present, as would be common in games of the era to make up for lower texture quality, Dante frequently pieces together what the object might mean or what purpose it may have once served. Dante's conclusions, as well as the occasional sarcastic comment, serve to distinguish him as a personality unique from the player. James Plyler, writer of Video Games and the Hero's Journey, elaborates on the typical paradigm present in video game protagonists. As he writes, there are two possible paradigms of immersion into games. One being the immersion where the player assumes the role of a fully written and voice-acted protagonist. This paradigm is more relatable to other narrative mediums. The other being the immersion where the player is given a silent protagonist with less obvious involvement, and is able to project himself more fully onto the character. With his flashy red outfit, mid-combat taunting, and characterization in future cutscenes,
Are you the human, the son of Sparta who challenges the darkness for this?
Block off, Featherface, or you can stick around and find out the hard way.
Dante is meant to be anything but silent. Rather than exist to serve the player is instead challenged to live up to the high standards Dante sets. Dante's combat style acts as a distinct place in which this expectation is seen. While the player is offered flexibility in how they choose to engage with the enemies Dante does battle with through the game, maximal use of his tools involves thinking as Dante would. Make as many variables work for you as possible, and look good doing it. Devil May Cry introduces the style meter to encourage the player to live up to this standard. The more varied their moves, and the longer they can rack up consecutive hits without getting hit themselves, the higher the style meter climbs. Devil May Cry pushing the player to be as stylish as possible results in a unique spin on the typical paradigm of game heroes. Just as Dante must live up to the legacy of his father by braving Malay Castle and defeating Mundus, the player understands that they must live up to Dante's potential by piloting him as skillfully as possible. Accessing Dante completely comes not through merely playing him, but by rising to the challenge he provides. Such a style of gameplay encourages players to think higher of Dante's capabilities, and distinguishes him enough to sell the idea of the player stepping into the boots of a modern-day hero. The unique weapons Dante acquires through his journey are themselves wider symbolic devices for Dante's journey down the path of myth. Early in the game, Dante encounters and then obtains the devil arm Alistair, taking from, quote, the personified spirit of the family blood feud. Its name is meant to evoke, quote, the inflicting of vengeance upon younger generations for the crimes of their forefathers. This is enacted in-game by how Dante actually acquires the sword. The voice's declaration that the weak shall give their hearts to it acts as its own trial for Dante. As part of Mundus Castle, its original intent was to test Dante's mettle, punishing him for his father's sin of closing the connection between the underworld and the human world. Dante's choice to rise through the rest of the sword, rather than simply lift it off him, is meant to symbolize his relationship to its pain and his familial legacy. Dante's willingness to embrace the trial of the sword causes it to deem him worthy. It is also worth noting that Alistair is sometimes, quote, an epithet applied to Zeus or any other god in his aspect as Avenger. In this sense, the lightning serves a dual purpose. Beyond evoking the iconic tool of the god Zeus, it also symbolically charges Dante with the spirit of familial vengeance. Passing the trial of the sword gives Dante access to his Devil Trigger, a special state where he cannot be knocked off his feet, deals more damage, moves faster, and slowly regains health over time. As a result of being prepared to take on the trial set out for him, Dante now has access to an enhanced state of fighting. Flickers of his devil form are an important part of the devil trigger, which Dante makes full use of in the climax of the game versus Mundus. Dante faces a similar trial through pain when acquiring his other usable weapon, Ifrit. The name Ifrit stems from Islamic mythology, referring to, quote, a class of powerful malevolent supernatural beings. Ifrit are, most often depicted as a wicked and ruthless being. This description matches the in-game Ifrit's declaration they will incinerate the fool who wakes them, and further demonstrates Dante's position as a modern-day mythical hero. Much like with Alistair, Dante faces the powerful magic of the gauntlets head-on. Despite crying in pain at their flames, he is ultimately able to once again embrace the trial and claim the weapon for his own use. One place the player's combat skills are frequently put to the test is in their skirmishes with Neil Angelo, one of Mundus' most powerful demons. Neil Angelo also serves as an important example of Devil May Cry taking from modern influences, that being of Darth Vader from the Star Wars franchise. Neil Angelo's cinematic inspiration was actually an extremely common medium for games of the era to draw from. Galanina also writes in the article that, quote, it should be noted that the characters themselves came to video games not from literature, but from cinema. In this regard, it makes sense why Dante would face down mythical creatures, such as a griffin, at the same time as he crosses swords with characters taken straight from Hollywood. Neil Angelo, or
a man with guts and honor,
as Dante refers to him, draws heavily from Vader in appearance, fighting style, and even in the relationship to the lead character. Both Neil Angelo and Darth Vader are clothed in black armor, complete with a flowing cape. Both characters also employ similar tactics versus their respective opponents. Darth Vader's fighting style is characterized by direct, overwhelming force, supplemented with arrogant remarks designed to trick his opponents into overextending.
You have learned much, young one.
You'll find I'm full of surprises.
Similarly, Neil Angelo wields a great sword that glows with demonic energy, suggesting its overwhelming power and evoking a lightsaber. His attacks consist of direct, powerful strikes that the player is forced to dodge around, as Dante cannot make use of a blocking move. One may compare this forced use of agility and acrobatics with Luke's similar style when he does battle with Vader. Neil Angelo, much like Vader, taunts Dante, goading him into striking further. Vader and Neil Angelo both use telepathy. Vader playing pieces of Clasity at Luke as their duel continues, and Neil Angelo summoning swords made of energy to hone in on and strike Dante. Skilled players will also find themselves able to use Neil Angelo's strategy against it. Just as Luke was able to match his father's direct aggression with his own in their final duel, Dante eventually becomes capable of wearing down Neil Angelo's attempts to block his strikes with use of his devil trigger. The strongest tie between Neil Angelo and Darth Vader is in their relationship to Dante and Luke Skywalker respectively. Much like how a pale-faced Vader was revealed to audiences following his triumph over the Emperor, Neil Angelo's final battle involves him unmasking to reveal a similarly pale face. Neil Angelo's final battle also takes place in a throne room with a large window, in a layout very similar to the Emperor's throne room, where Vader has his final duel. Dante discovers after Neil Angelo's death that Neil Angelo was actually his brother, Virgil, tying into the familial themes of the game. Much like how Vader's love for his son inspired him to kill the Emperor, Neil Angelo is unable to kill Dante upon spotting his amulet in earlier battles, a reminder to a corrupted Virgil of his true self and his mother's love. Through taking influence from a far more recent, but still extremely impactful, iteration on the monomyth, Neil Angelo's presence serves as yet another instance of Devil May Cry's blended reality. The imagery of a space fantasy franchise has been implemented in an imposing Black Knight, retaining its central concepts but with a wildly different base. Just as Luke was ultimately responsible for his father's release from the dark side, Dante frees his brother from being controlled by Mundus. Taking on the symbolic role of Luke Skywalker, an established hero, is another sort of trial for Dante, and one that concludes with him proving he is worthy of comparison to the young Jedi Knight. Dante's defeat of Neil Angelo rewards him Virgil's amulet, a gift from their mother. Similar to his own, the two combine with the player's starting weapon, the Force Edge, to form Sparta. Named for its wielder, this was Sparta's blade, as could be seen in the opening cutscene, reaffirming that Dante's ability to face and overcome his trials is causing him to walk the path of his legendary father. This is further reinforced through Sparta's image flickering as Dante acquires Sparta, as well as Dante's finishing pose mirroring his father's in the opening. Dante's trials and acquisition of weapons reflects the second stage of the hero's journey. Battling with demons, such as Neil Angelo, and unlocking new abilities, such as Devil Trigger, serve as an in-game way to reflect Dante's growing power. His choice to embrace the trial by pain, provided by Alistair and Ifrit, as well as demonstrate his ability to fight like established heroes, such as Luke Skywalker, have caused him to become more of a hero in his own right. Other mythical names are used in more minor roles through the course of the game. The Staff of Hermes, for example, fills its symbolic role as a sign of safety for travelers. Obtained in Mission 13, Dante carries this item with him until Mission 16, at which point it grants access to the underworld. The item fills a similar purpose to what the Greeks and Romans defined it as, quote, the badge of heralds and ambassadors, signifying their inviolability. Through the course of the game, Dante contends with forces inspired by both traditional and modern mythology. The closing levels of Devil May Cry involve Dante rising above these influences and utilizing previously acquired items and symbols to create his own myth. The first sign of Dante defying the standards set out for him comes in the redemption of Trish. Actually a creation of Mundus designed to lure Dante, Trish was made to appear similar to Dante's mother, Eva. By manipulating Dante's attachment to his late mother, Mundus hoped to leave Dante too emotional to properly spot the trap, exploiting his human half. What Mundus never could have expected, however, was Dante's kindness winning Trish over. Previously saving her life after finding out the truth, Trish is moved to save Dante's life as Mundus is about to kill him.
So sad that humans will always be humans. No more. Has the Spartan blood been spoiled over the ages? Now, die!
Trish!
Trish! No!
Mundus naturally taunts Dante, expecting him to break down. But once again, Dante embraces his feeling and summons the strength needed to contest Mundus head on.
How much longer are you going to keep zapping? Come out and show yourself, Mundus!
Consumed with rage, Dante begins his battle with Mundus by reaching previously unseen levels of power. The demon form of Devil Trigger is no longer confined to brief flashes, instead becoming Dante's consistent form during the first stage of his battle with Mundus. At his strongest, Dante transforms into a dragon, ramming Mundus head on. It's only after Mundus is able to catch Dante off guard that he returns to his human form, where he must take up his father's blade and defeat the same demon his father had to. Once Mundus is, temporarily, defeated, Dante rushes back to a dead Trish.
My mother risked her life for me, and now you too. I should have saved you. I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
This was my mother's. Now I'm giving it to you. My father's also here now. Rest in peace.
His choice to utilize the amulet and devil sword in mourning to her serves as the ultimate example of Dante rising to become his own hero. After navigating a castle out of time and facing demons meant to evoke mythology in all its forms, Dante uses the tools given to him for his own means. Rather than continue to view Sparta as a sign of his father's power he must keep with him, or the amulet as a symbol of his mother's love, he chooses to use both to represent his dead parents. Dante's love for Trish, after her actions, manifests in him creating his own ritual, causing Devil May Cry to follow in the pattern of countless myths before it. As a direct consequence of the player rising to the challenge of being Dante, and piloting him through endless trials and battles, their reward is to see him move from someone merely accessing and utilizing tools of mythic significance to creating his own. Dante honors his mother and distinguishes himself from his father by choosing to act on his love for Trish, rather than identify with the power he has cultivated over the course of the game. This same love for Trish is what brings her back to life, and what ultimately allows Dante and Trish to banish the struggling Mundus. It is here that Devil May Cry provides its final examples of a blend of aesthetics. Demonic magic is what is used to banish Mundus, but it is channeled through Dante's modern-day firearms. A mystical split between the human and demon worlds is what saves humanity from Mundus, but conventional technology, in the form of the biplane, is what saves Dante and Trish from the collapsing castle. With this, the final stage of the hero's journey is completed. After a literal flight from the castle, Dante has mastered the demon world through reaching unseen levels of power, and mastered the human world by embracing his emotions and triumphing because of them. He has become his own hero, ready to use his newfound status to preserve order in the human world, just like his father. Dante's adventures continue in Devil May Cry sequels, which find several new ways to view this modern-day hero. Those interested in trying the series can find the first 3 games in the Devil May Cry HD collection, which is available on most modern platforms.